I was a 29-year-old software engineer at a growing tech company in Seattle. The first time I laid eyes on Isabella, I thought I had finally found the one. We had been dating for 8 months now, and the one thing she kept insisting on was meeting her parents. When she finally set up dinner at an authentic Spanish restaurant, she assured me her family spoke no English. What Isabella didn't know was that I spoke fluent Spanish after 4 years in college and 2 working in Mexico City. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Drop a like and subscribe if you want to hear how I exposed every lie my girlfriend ever told me right in front of her parents. I first met Isabella at a tech networking event downtown. She stood out immediately in the crowd of standard tech bros and startup hopefuls. With her glossy black hair, confident smile, and sharp wit, she introduced herself as a UX designer for a rival company. I was instantly drawn to her energy, and the way she spoke about her work with such passion. I believe that good design should be invisible, she had said, her eyes lighting up. Users should never have to think about how to use something. I asked for her number that night, and by the end of the week we met for coffee at a small cafe near my office. She wore a deep red blouse that day, and I remember thinking how it perfectly matched her bold personality. Our conversation flowed effortlessly as we discussed our work, our ambitions, and our favorite spots around Seattle. I moved here 3 years ago, she told me. My family is still back in Mexico in a small town near Oaxaca. I nodded, intrigued by her background. Do you visit them often? When I can. She replied with a slight shrug. Flights are expensive, and I'm saving for my future here. We video chat almost every weekend, though. As the weeks passed, our relationship deepened. I took Isabella hiking at Mount Rainier, introduced her to the best seafood spots along the pier, and showed her my favorite indie bookstore in Capitol Hill. She was adventurous and fun, always ready, with a quick joke or an interesting observation. Yet I noticed she rarely spoke about her past or her family in detail. Whenever I asked specific questions, she would provide vague answers or quickly change the subject. At the time, I chalked it up to cultural differences, or perhaps a complicated family history she wasn't ready to share. One evening at my apartment while I was cooking dinner, Isabella was in the living room having a video call with her family. I could hear her speaking rapid Spanish, her voice animated and expressive. When she finished, I asked how her family was doing. They're good, she said simply. My mom is wondering when I'll bring you to meet them. I'd love to meet them someday, I replied. Maybe we could plan a trip to Mexico. A flash of something I couldn't quite read crossed her face. Maybe. They're very traditional, though. It might be better if they visit here first. As our relationship progressed, I introduced Isabella to my close friends, my coworkers, and eventually my parents when they visited from Chicago. Everyone seemed to like her. Though my best friend Jake mentioned that something about her seemed performative. I dismissed his concern, attributing it to the fact that he had recently gone through a bad breakup and was feeling cynical about relationships in general. One night over dinner at my place, I mentioned that I had studied Spanish for 4 years in college. Really, Isabella asked, setting down her fork. Say something then. I recited a few basic phrases, intentionally keeping my pronunciation slightly awkward. To be honest, I was better than I let on, but something in her reaction made me downplay my abilities. She laughed a bit too dismissively. That's cute, but your accent is terrible. You should probably stick to English. I used to be better, I said. I worked on some projects with teams in Latin America a few years back. Trust me, she said, patting my hand. You don't need Spanish. I'll translate everything for you when you meet my family. From that moment on, I decided not to mention my Spanish skills again. It seemed to make her uncomfortable, and I didn't want to create unnecessary tension. In retrospect, I should have recognized this as the first significant red flag. As we approached our 6-month anniversary, I began noticing other concerning behaviors. Isabella would often say she was working late, but when I texted her coworker Emily about surprising Isabella with dinner, Emily mentioned Isabella had left hours earlier. When confronted, Isabella claimed she had gone for drinks with clients and forgot to mention it. Then there was the phone call I overheard one evening when I came home early from work. Isabella was on my balcony, speaking Spanish in a hushed, intimate tone. When she saw me, she quickly ended the call. "Who was that?" I asked casually. "Just my brother," she said, slipping her phone into her pocket. "He's having girlfriend problems again." I nodded, but doubt had begun to creep in. The tone she had used didn't sound like she was talking to a sibling, but I pushed the thought aside. I trusted Isabella, and I didn't want to become the jealous, suspicious boyfriend. As the months passed, I started noticing inconsistencies in her stories about her family. Once she mentioned her father was a dentist, but later referred to him as a business owner. She said her mother was a homemaker, then later talked about her mother's teaching career. When I pointed out these discrepancies, she would become defensive or laugh it off as my misunderstanding. Despite these warning signs, I was falling in love with Isabella, or at least the person I thought she was. She was the first woman I had dated who matched my ambition and intelligence, who challenged me and made me laugh. I wanted to believe in what we had built together. Around our 8-month anniversary, Isabella began bringing up the topic of family more frequently. "My parents are asking about you all the time," she said one evening, as we walked along the waterfront. "They want to know when they'll finally get to meet the man who has stolen their daughter's heart." "I'd love to meet them," I replied. "Should we plan a trip to Mexico?" Isabella shook her head. "Actually, they're coming to visit next month. They want to have dinner with us." This surprised me, as she had rarely mentioned her family planning to visit. "That's great. I can't wait to meet them. Will they be staying with you?" "No," she said quickly. "They're staying with my cousin. Her place is bigger." "And Wyatt," she added, squeezing my hand. "They don't speak English at all. They're from a small town and never had the opportunity to learn." "I'll translate everything okay. No problem," I assured her, hiding my growing skepticism. For someone from a small town, Isabella spoke perfect, unaccented English. It seemed odd that her parents wouldn't have picked up at least some basic phrases. As the dinner date approached, Isabella became increasingly particular about every detail. She told me exactly what to wear: a blue dress shirt, not the green one. I initially suggested what gift to bring, a specific brand of tequila, and even coached me on proper greeting etiquette. "Remember, my father is very traditional. Look him in the eye when you shake his hand, but not for too long. And compliment my mother on her appearance, but keep it respectful." I dutifully purchased the gifts. She suggested the tequila for her father, a scarf for her mother, and chocolates for her younger sister, who would also be joining us. I even practiced a few respectful greetings in Spanish, pretending to struggle with the pronunciation when Isabella helped me. "God, Wyatt, it's not that hard," she said, laughing. "Just say mucho gusto when you meet them. Even you can manage that." Her condescending tone stung, but I brushed it off as pre-dinner nerves. Still, as the day approached, my suspicions continued to grow. One morning, while Isabella was in the shower, her phone lit up with a text message. I knew I shouldn't look, but the preview was visible on her lock screen. "Everything set for Friday night. Follow the plan." The message was in English, not Spanish, and from someone named Carlos. I felt a knot form in my stomach, but told myself there could be an innocent explanation. Maybe Carlos was her brother helping with the dinner arrangements. Maybe the plan referred to some surprise she was planning for me or her parents. But the doubts continued to multiply. The weekend before the dinner, Isabella mentioned her family came from Puebla, not Oaxaca, as she had originally told me. When I pointed this out, she waved it off. "Did I say Oaxaca?" "No, they're from Puebla. My grandmother was from Oaxaca. You must have confused the two." I began researching both regions, learning about their customs and local expressions. If Isabella was telling the truth, I wanted to impress her family with some knowledge of their hometown. But the more I looked into it, the more I found discrepancies with what Isabella had told me about her upbringing. She had described growing up in a small, traditional community, yet the specific town she mentioned was actually quite modernized. She talked about her father's dental practice being the only one in town, but the area had several medical facilities. She mentioned local festivals and foods that didn't align with the regional traditions. The night before our dinner, I lay awake, wrestling with my doubts. Part of me wanted to confront Isabella, to demand the truth before we met her family. But another part feared what I might discover. Despite the inconsistencies and red flags, I had fallen in love with her. What if I was wrong? What if I ruined everything over unfounded suspicions? In the end, I decided to proceed with the dinner. If Isabella was being truthful, I would meet her family and hopefully strengthen our relationship. If she was lying, well, I would find out soon enough. The day of the dinner arrived and Isabella was unusually tense. She changed her outfit 3 times and kept checking her phone. On the drive to the restaurant, she barely spoke except to remind me one last time about the importance of making a good impression. "Remember, my family is everything to me," she said, staring out the window. "If they don't like you, this won't work." "I understand," I replied, reaching for her hand. She let me hold it, but her fingers remained stiff in my grip. "It'll be fine, Isabella. They'll see how much I care about you." She nodded distractedly, then pulled out her phone and began typing rapidly. I caught a glimpse of the name Carlos at the top of the screen before she angled it away from me. We arrived at La Cantina, an upscale Spanish restaurant in downtown Seattle. As we walked in, Isabella suddenly became animated, waving at a table in the corner where 3 people Saturday. An older man with salt and pepper hair, a well-dressed woman who appeared to be in her 50s, and a younger woman who looked around Isabella's age. "There they are," Isabella said, taking my arm. "Remember, let me do all the talking." As we approached, I immediately noticed something odd. Isabella had described her parents as traditional people from a small Mexican town. Yet the man wore an expensive-looking watch and designer glasses, while the woman's perfectly manicured nails and stylish haircut spoke of urban sophistication. Neither of them had the weathered look of people who had spent their lives working in a small community. And the younger woman, supposedly Isabella's sister, looked nothing like her. Isabella greeted them with hugs and rapid Spanish. I caught some of what she said, introducing me, though I pretended not to understand. "Este es Wyatt, el tipo del que les hablé. No entiende ni una palabra de español, así que podemos hablar libremente." "This is Wyatt, the guy I told you about. He doesn't understand a word of Spanish, so we can talk freely." The man introduced as her father extended his hand to me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mucho gusto," I said, with an intentionally thick American accent, shaking his hand. He responded with a torrent of Spanish that I pretended not to understand, looking to Isabella for translation. She smiled sweetly. "My father says he's very happy to finally meet you, and that he can see why I fell for such a handsome man." What he had actually said was much less complimentary. "So, this is the rich tech guy. He doesn't look that special." The hostess led us to our table, and I made sure to pull out chairs for both Isabella and her mother. I presented the gifts I'd brought, which were received with polite smiles and nods. Isabella translated their thanks, embellishing greatly on their actual brief acknowledgments. As we settled in, I maintained my facade of not understanding Spanish, smiling pleasantly whenever they spoke and waiting for Isabella to translate. The family spoke with the rapid-fire cadence of native speakers, but I noticed they occasionally used phrases and expressions that were more common in Spain than Mexico, another inconsistency. "Mi madre quiere saber qué haces exactamente en tu trabajo," Isabella said, gesturing toward her mother. "My mother wants to know exactly what you do in your job." I explained my role as a software engineer, keeping it simple so Isabella could translate easily. But instead of translating accurately, she embellished significantly. "Él gana mucho dinero," she told them. "Más de 100,000 al año. Y tiene opciones de acciones que valen aún más." He makes a lot of money, more than 100,000 a year, and has stock options worth even more. The older man raised his eyebrows, suddenly more interested. "Preguntale si tiene intención de comprar una casa pronto." Ask him if he plans to buy a house soon. Isabella turned to me with a sweet smile. My father is impressed by your career. He wants to know if you enjoy your work. I talked about my passion for coding and problem-solving while observing the subtle glances exchanged between Isabella and her fake family members. There was something performative about their interaction, as if they were actors following a loose script. As appetizers arrived, the conversation continued in this duplicitous pattern. Isabella would ask me a question in English. I would answer honestly. And then she would completely distort my response when translating to Spanish, often adding details about my finances or future plans that I had never mentioned. Él está buscando establecerse pronto, she told them. Menciona el matrimonio cada vez más. He's looking to settle down soon. He mentions marriage more and more. This was completely untrue. While I was serious about our relationship, I had never broached the topic of marriage with Isabella. The younger woman, supposedly Isabella's sister, snickered at this. Y realmente cree todo lo que le has contado sobre tu familia. And he really believes everything. You've told him about your family. Isabella nodded, taking a sip of her wine. Es tan ingenuo. Le he contado tantas historias contradictorias y nunca se da cuenta. He's so naive. I've told him so many contradictory stories and he never notices. The three of them laughed, and I maintained my clueless smile, feeling a cold anger building inside me. Isabella had not only been lying to me about her background, but was now openly mocking me to these strangers who were clearly not her family. As our main courses arrived, the conversation took an even darker turn. The older man asked directly about my financial situation, with Isabella translating his questions into innocuous inquiries about my hobbies and interests. Meanwhile, in Spanish, they discussed how long Isabella should continue the relationship before making her move. ¿Cuánto tiempo más necesitas antes de que podamos proceder con el plan?, the man asked. How much more time do you need before we can proceed with the plan? Isabella glanced at me, then replied in a lower voice. Un par de meses más. Quiero asegurarme de que confíe completamente en mí antes de sugerir que invirtamos juntos. A couple more months. I want to make sure he completely trusts me before suggesting we invest together. The pieces were falling into place. This wasn't about introducing me to her family. This was some kind of long con, with Isabella positioning herself to eventually ask for money for a fraudulent investment. I thought about the inconsistencies in her stories, her mysterious phone calls, the text from someone named Carlos. It all made sense now. The older woman noticed me watching them intently and said something to Isabella, who laughed dismissively. No te preocupes, she assured the woman. Te lo digo, es demasiado estúpido para entender. Ni siquiera puede pedir correctamente en un restaurante mexicano. Don't worry. I'm telling you, he's too stupid to understand. He can't even order correctly in a Mexican restaurant. As the dinner progressed, I learned more about the real Isabella through their unguarded conversation. She had another boyfriend named Carlos, who apparently knew about me, and found the situation amusing. The parents were friends of hers who had run similar cons before. They discussed previous targets and laughed about how easy I had been to manipulate. Nunca he visto a alguien tan desesperado por creer en el amor, Isabella said, making the others laugh. Prácticamente se lo tragó todo. I've never seen someone so dispirited to believe in love. He practically swallowed everything. Every word was like a knife twisting in my gut. 8 months of what I thought was a meaningful relationship had been nothing but an elaborate deception. The woman I had fallen in love with didn't even exist. She was a character Isabella had created, specifically to appeal to me. I felt my hands trembling slightly under the table. Anger, hurt, and humiliation washed over me in waves. But beneath those emotions, another feeling was growing: stronger determination. I wasn't going to leave this table as the pathetic, gullible victim they thought I was. As I sat there pretending to enjoy my meal while they ridiculed me in what they thought was a private conversation, I silently catalogued every lie Isabella had told me over the past 8 months. I recalled the inconsistencies in her stories, the late nights she claimed to be working, the mysterious phone calls. Each memory now took on a new, sinister meaning. Y cuando termine con él, Isabella was saying, Carlos y yo, podemos finalmente irnos a vivir juntos con el dinero. And when I'm done with him, Carlos and I can finally move in together with the money. The fake father lifted his glass in a mock toast. Por un trabajo bien hecho entonces. To a job well done, then. They clinked glasses, laughing at my expense, while I sat there, the unwitting fool in their little performance. But not for much longer. Isabella turned to me with a fabricated smile. My father just toasted to our happiness, she translated falsely. Isn't that sweet? I nodded, raising my glass. Very sweet. Your family is so welcoming. As dessert was served, I knew the moment was approaching. Isabella was growing more reckless in her comments, perhaps emboldened by the wine and the apparent success of her charade. Es como un cachorro, she told her friends. Completamente leal y completamente estúpido. He's like a puppy. Completely loyal and completely stupid. The younger woman giggled. ¿Cuándo vas a terminar esto? Me estoy aburriendo. When are you going to end this? I'm getting bored. Isabella shrugged. Pronto. Solo necesito que firme algunos documentos primero. Soon. I just need him to sign some documents first. I listened, my resolve hardening, with each dismissive comment and cruel joke. As the meal drew to a close, Isabella suggested they wrap up the charade soon. The waiter brought the check, and I insisted on paying despite the older man's feigned protests. As we all stood to leave, I knew it was time. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and prepared to flip the script on Isabella's elaborate performance. Muchas gracias por su hospitalidad esta noche, I said in perfect fluent Spanish, looking directly at Isabella's fake parents. Ha sido muy revelador conocer a los familiares de Isabella. Thank you very much for your hospitality tonight. It has been very revealing, meeting Isabella's family. The color drained from Isabella's face. The three companions froze, exchanging panicked glances. The silence that followed was the most satisfying moment of the entire evening. Wyatt, I can explain. Isabella finally stammered, switching to English. It was just a joke, we were just having fun. I cut her off, continuing in Spanish. Let me be clear about what I understand. You three are not family. You're accomplices in whatever scheme Isabella has been planning. The older man attempted to salvage the situation. Hubo un malentendido. There was a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I replied coldly. I understood everything perfectly, including all the lies Isabella has told me over the past 8 months. I turned to Isabella, whose eyes were wide with shock and growing fear. You told them I was too stupid to understand Spanish, but I'm fluent. I worked in Mexico City for 2 years after college. I understood every word tonight, and every lie you've told me since we met. I addressed each point directly, no longer holding back. You're not from a small town near Oaxaca or Puebla. Your parents aren't a dentist and a teacher. You've been seeing someone named Carlos throughout our relationship. You've been planning to manipulate me into some kind of investment scam. Isabella's face cycled through expressions: shock, embarrassment, then a desperate attempt at damage control. Wyatt, please, I can explain everything. These aren't my real parents, yes, but I only did this because you thought I was an easy target. I finished for her. A naive tech guy with money who was desperate to believe in love, as you put it. I addressed her accomplices next. You should know that Isabella has been inconsistent in her stories to me as well. The family background she told me doesn't match what she's apparently told you. She's playing everyone. The younger woman glared at Isabella. You said this would be simple. You didn't say he spoke Spanish. She never asked. I replied before Isabella could speak. She assumed I was telling the truth when I downplayed my abilities. Unlike her, I don't lie about everything. I pulled out my wallet and placed enough cash on the table to cover the entire bill. Dinner's on me. Consider it payment for showing me exactly who Isabella really is before I made an even bigger mistake. Isabella grabbed my arm as I turned to leave. Wyatt, wait. It wasn't all fake. My feelings for you are real. I looked into her eyes, searching for any hint of the woman I thought I had known. All I saw was panic at being caught. Nothing about you is real, Isabella. Not your name, not your family, not your feelings. The only real thing was my affection for you, and you threw that away for whatever con you were running. I gently removed her hand from my arm. Don't contact me again. If you come to my apartment or workplace, I'll file for a restraining order and report this attempted fraud to the police. With that, I walked out of the restaurant, leaving Isabella and her fake family staring after me in stunned silence. The cool night air felt cleansing as I stepped outside, like I was washing away 8 months of deception. The weeks following that dinner were difficult. I went through all the stages of grief, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. Isabella tried to contact me several times, alternating between tearful apologies, angry accusations, and even threats. I blocked her number, removed her from all social media, and made sure my apartment building security knew not to let her in. I told my closest friends what had happened, both as a warning and because I needed their support. Jake, who had been suspicious from the beginning, helped me ensure she couldn't access any of my accounts or personal information. You know what the silver lining is here, he said one evening as we were having drinks. You found out who she really was before she could do any real damage. He was right. As painful as the revelation had been, it could have been much worse. I hadn't invested money in her schemes, hadn't shared access to my finances, hadn't proposed or merged our lives in any permanent way. Gradually, I began to heal. I focused on work, reconnected with friends I had neglected during my relationship with Isabella, and even started therapy to help process the betrayal and rebuild my trust in others. My therapist helped me understand that Isabella's deception wasn't a reflection on me or my judgment, but on her own character. Manipulative people like that target good people, she explained. Your openness and capacity for trust aren't weaknesses. They're strengths that the right person will value, not exploit. 6 months after the disastrous dinner, I was in a much better place. I had received a promotion at work, expanded my social circle, and even started casually dating again, though I was taking things very slowly and paying close attention to inconsistencies or red flags. The experience taught me valuable lessons about relationships and about myself. I learned to trust my instincts when something feels wrong. I learned that love shouldn't come with constant explanations and excuses. I learned that real connection is built on honesty and mutual respect, not manipulation and deceit. Most importantly, I learned my own worth. I deserved someone who was genuine, who wanted me for who I was, not what I could provide. The right relationship wouldn't leave me constantly doubting or making excuses. The dinner with Isabella's fake family had been one of the most humiliating experiences of my life. But in exposing her lies, I had reclaimed my dignity and set myself free from a relationship that would have only brought more pain. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away with your head held high, knowing your own truth. Have you ever caught someone in a significant lie? What did you do about it? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. Share this with someone who might need a reminder to trust their instincts when something feels wrong. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the most painful revelations lead to the most important growth.